Hey guys, so this is going to be a video that's kind of going to go over the main ideas of what you're going to have to answer on the link box on the last tab of your website. So let's go to the website so we could discuss over what that is. Well, we're to website. Here's the sample that I created for you. And here's D-Day to the end of the war. And the link box that you'll be answering is, was Truman justified in dropping 2 atomic bombs to end the war on Japan during World War II? So when you click on it, it should take you to a Google Doc that you created. And in 10 to 12 sentences, you're going to answer that question. Now, it says that following the question using this document here. That document is the one that we used in class that looks like this, right? And we went over this stuff in class. So let's go back to the notes. We kind of get to the idea of where we were in the war. So the Japanese, after loss after loss after loss, started to show their desperation, and we talked about that when they started to employ kamikazes. Kamikazes are basically suicide bombers who take their flights or their airplanes, and they use them as a big, huge bomb and dive them into ships to try to take as many people with them. And like we talked about, 3,500 pilots are going to commit suicide, and they're going to kill over 7,000 sailors. And that showed how desperate Japan was and that they kept on losing. The desperation continued to show in the last two battles of Iwo Jima and Okinawa. Here, basically, Japan knew these are our last two islands before just having Japan left, and we can't lose them. So they fought and fought. Some of the fiercest fighting of the war, meaning some of the harshest and most difficult and the worst fighting of the war. In Iwo Jima, 20,700 Japanese troops were there, and only 200 survived. They fought all the way to the end. In Okinawa, the last island before they lose everything and only have Japan left, 95,000. So what these two battles showed us was, one, they were the last two battles of the war. Two, the Japanese were willing to fight to the death to defend those islands. And if they're willing to fight like that on those two islands, how are they going to fight to defend Japan if we had to invade them? So this is ultimately going to be one of the reasons that convinces Truman that we should drop the bombs. Now, when you're Truman, at this point of the war's over. We know we won. Japan knows we won. Japan is going to surrender. I know they're going to surrender. The only question is, how are they going to surrender? We demanded an unconditional surrender. Unconditional means they are going to surrender exactly the way we tell them, no conditions at all. And they basically said yes to everything except to one thing. That one for sure. They said no, no, hell no. That's a hard pass. It will not happen. And that one thing was we wanted them to give up their emperor, and we wanted to try him for war crimes for attacking Pearl Harbor and to put him in an American prison. And they said definitely not, would not happen. So now if you're Truman, you got two choices. Choice one is you gotta have to invade Japan. Invade Japan on the beaches of Japan, because they're an island. And that basically creating a D-Day Part 2 was estimated that up to 1 million American deaths would happen because of that. So, and Truman tried to warn them in terms of what weapon we have about the atomic bomb. He said, you guys will face prompt and utter destruction if you don't surrender. They flew planes over certain cities and they dropped leaflets, little piece of paper telling them, we have this big ass weapon. Um, we don't want to use it, but you have to surrender. And the Japanese continue to say yes to everything, but no to giving up their emperor. The other choice, of course, that he has other than invade Japan is to drop the 2 atomic bombs. So now let's go to the document and let's go over some of the reasons why you are going to have to decide if you're going to have to decide if, let's go to the document. Okay, so first, the top part of the document, as you can see, is going to tell you all the things that you would use if you agreed with Truman that we should drop the bomb and that he was justified, that it was okay for him to drop it. The bottom part is everything that you would use to say, no, it wasn't justified, he was wrong. So it all depends on how you see it. And this is what you're going to answer when I see this document here that's linked to your link box over here. So when I click on it, this is going to open up, and here's where I'm going to see your answer. It depends on you. So if you think that he was justified, you would say that the Japanese were fighting like crazy at the end. And if they fought like crazy like that, what was that going to look like if we had to invade Japan? We had already planned to firebomb both of those cities, where you fly over and just drop bomb, 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 a bomb. They had estimated it was going to kill 100,000. So they were already going to face something because the Japanese wouldn't surrender. With 2 bombs only, you can't just waste one, as people argue that you should show them how big and powerful this weapon is. You can't just waste on an example to show them. um, you had to use them. Like I said, up to a million American soldiers would die in invading Japan. So when you are talking about a war that had already been ongoing for so many years, so many people had already died in Europe and in Pacific. Now he has to make a decision to invade Japan, which causes another million soldiers to die. And like I said, the cities were already going to be firebombed. Plus, we already start seeing Joseph Stalin as an enemy. Even though he was on our side and the Allies during World War II, we see him in the future as an enemy, and we want to show them, look what we have. Look what massive weapon we have. To you better behave well, because otherwise we could use this on you. So these are all the arguments that you could use of why he was justified. Saving American soldiers' lives. We were already going to firebomb the cities, and the Japanese were fighting to the point where if we invaded, it was going to be deadly and horrible. Now, why was he not justified? One, Japan was already basically saying they quit. They had said yes to every surrender condition except for the one for the emperor. This idea of the United States being so upset after the attack of Pearl Harbor that the only surrender we would accept is unconditional, especially since they wanted to keep their emperor and the emperor is like God on earth to them, they weren't going to give him up. It kind of showed that we weren't budging at all. We could have also just dropped one of those bombs on Tokyo Harbor, shown them what destruction was coming, and then let them see what that would have looked like in a city before actually dropping it there. And then even if we had to drop one on Hiroshima, the first city we dropped it, we didn't give enough time. 3 days later, we dropped it on Nagasaki. What the argument is basically we spent so much money on building this bomb that we could have just not used it. We had to use it. So at this point, you have to decide. Yes, it was justified. No, it wasn't. So then now, back to the notes. All right, so what happens on August 6, 1945? A B-29 bomber, Enola Gay, will release the atomic bomb codenamed Little Boy over Hiroshima and instantly cause a massive explosion that will kill people instantly with fire and then for years with radiation from the nuclear cloud. And 3 days later, on August 9th, we did it to Hiroshima with the bomb codenamed Fat Man. $200,000 dead instantly from these two bombs, and many more will die later. And still, Japan would not surrender. Even though we dropped two nuclear bombs, they still would not surrender. Eventually, they would surrender on September 2nd, 1945, when we let them keep the emperor, but only if the emperor no longer ran the government. He could stay as their religious leader, but he would no longer run the government, and that ultimately ends World War II.